What's up, guys? Welcome to this episode of Becoming the 1% podcast. My guest today is Coach Brady Volmering. We are going to get into the details of the tenets of the training that he does. He has a very unique style of coaching. I know you're going to enjoy it. Love the episode. This episode of Becoming the 1% podcast.
Entrepreneurial. We got some really big things coming.
You have to have the willingness.
It's an A or B.
Try and use it as a tool.
This is phenomenal.
All details make up a person.
It's what we believe in the industry.
I've seen you doing a lot of stuff, a lot of interesting movement patterns, a lot of, I guess I would put it sort of in a way that your focus is on bulletproofing tendons. It seems like a lot of your focus is on that. A lot of the movements that you're doing emphasize that. First off, I want to kind of just start at the beginning. What's your background in athletics? How did you even get into this?
Yeah. So for myself personally, I really got interested in training in athletics when I was in 8th grade. So what happened was I got invited to some baseball tryout where, I mean, to be straight up, there was like 3 people at the tryout, and I got accepted, invited to this thing. So I was like, oh, I'm really good. I'm going to put everything that I have into this. And so that kind of got me, even if it might have not actually been that way, that kind of got me interested in training and athletics and everything like that. So from that point forward, I basically started to hop on online forums. So now we have Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, we have all these different things. Back then it was just online forums, right? Mm-hmm. So I started to go to those to try to pull as much information as I could to be able to train myself to get myself as good as I possibly could. So I was leaving logs online, every day I would train. I'd write down, okay, this is what I did today. This is what I got out of it. Anyone have any feedback for it? So it's been interesting because I've really been doing that. Like I do that on my Instagram now or on different social platforms now in terms of me sharing what I'm doing. But I really started doing that since when I was in 8th grade. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing that for, 14 or 15 years kind of in this arena, not training other people at that time, but I was training myself at that time, just trying to pull everything out of myself that I could. And so over the course of, from 8th grade through high school, really focused a lot on baseball, put a lot of time and effort into that. And then once I got into college, I started writing online articles as I was playing baseball in college, writing online articles, starting to do blogs. And then that just eventually turned into a business that I started during my senior year of college, where I just had people ask me like, hey, what should I do? What should I do? So I just started to start a business out of that basically. And that progressed into, around the end of 2020, I was still only doing baseball within my business. And I just kind of said okay, I'm going to take a little bit of a step back here because I myself wasn't playing baseball anymore. And I was like, I want to work with baseball athletes, that's fine, but I don't want it to be exclusively in that. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to branch out into other things, be able to talk to other athletes.
Were you studying exercise science in college? Was that your field of study?
Yeah, I did exercise science in college. If you want me to be completely honest, it was 30 years behind, 50 years behind.
Oh, it always is.
So I didn't. I don't have my paper. I graduated, I stood on stage and everything. I don't have my paper diploma because I was like, nobody's going to ask and nobody cares.
No.
But I did go to school for that, yes. So then around 2020, I was like, okay, I want to do something different and be able to include other athletes, be able to do, people with injuries, be able to do non-athletes, be able to talk more about nutrition, and just other things that are involved with life in general for people. And so that's when I started DAC Performance and Health, which is what it is now. And that's
what does it stand for, by the way? DAC, DAC Performance. What does that stand for?
Decide, Act, Conquer.
Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you come up with that?
I was just, when I first started, I was like, okay, what am I going to call this? And someone else that I knew that had started a business had an acronym for theirs. So I was like, okay, acronyms are cool. What can I come up with? And then eventually just came to DAC. And I like that, I don't know, that K sound or that DAC sound. I just like that.
Yeah.
Because I think it can be turned into a bunch of stuff. DAC Performance and Health, DAC Farms, DAC, whatever. It can kind of be the umbrella that I work with.
Yeah, it's like a call to action.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you study in school. You've got this thing going where you're focusing primarily on baseball, but you want to expand outside of that. How does that start to happen? What did you do?
Yeah, so in 2019, I was working at an actual in-person facility. I was there for 6 months. We just had different visions in terms of the vision that I had and the vision that the person that owned that had. And so I took 3 months. Honestly, it wasn't that much fun for me, because there's 3 months where I didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do, right? But I took those 3 months and just kind of sat down and tried to figure out what is it that I actually want to do. And so what I started to do was just started to train myself really hard again, and then started to share what I was doing with that. And what ended up happening was, yes, the content that I would put out would be around training, or the videos, what I was doing was training, but what I would actually talk about would sometimes be training, but sometimes it wouldn't be. So it'd be like, hey, how do you handle, emotional stuff that you don't want to go through, but you have to go through? Like, how do you handle nutritional stuff? How do you handle just all these different aspects of life that go into what it means to be a human being or to be a person, right? And so it allowed me to really branch out into those other areas as I was training athletes. And that's just where it started, is like me in a freaking
garage.
Yeah.
Right? Is this your garage? Pull up one of his videos, bud.
Well, at the start, so like if you go, this is where I'm at now. At the start, like at the very, very start, I was back home for 3 months in Michigan, and my parents
What part of Michigan?
Harbor Beach. You're gonna have no idea where that is.
My dad's from Warren. That's
Okay.
funny because growing up we spent a bunch of time in Michigan.
Have you heard of Harbor Beach?
No, actually no.
Have you heard of Port Huron?
Yes.
Okay, it's an hour north of that. So.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Very cool. Yeah,
But-
small world.
Yeah, exactly. But no, so I was basically in their shed, and there's just like a freaking picnic table, a couple small weights, and I was just like doing stuff there. And eventually moved back out to Springfield, and then started in a garage at that point. Just literally freaking, training my ass off, and then sharing what I was doing, and then it just grew from there.
Yeah.
So
It's okay. So your training methods, because I was attracted to your platform and what it is you're doing for two reasons. A, I love that you're working out of a garage. I appreciate that, obviously, but also it's a very unique movements in general. Your concentric, your eccentric, your amortization phases are always somehow tweaked by different coaches in different ways, range of motion, all that stuff as well. What you're doing is it seems like it's very specific. Is there a overarching reason why almost everything I see you doing is almost like impact? Like, it seems like everything is very fast, very quick. And of course, athletic performance pertains directly to that sort of thing in a game setting. Was that in any way what has translated to the way in which you're training?
yeah, so a lot of not everything that I do is that way, right? But there is a lot of stuff that I do that is that way. That is, I just think it looks like a lot of it is that way because a lot of other people don't actually do that within their training, right? So what you're talking about is like a lot of the impulse stuff. So whether it's with the hyper arm, or whether it's just with the rope, or whether it's with some rebound rep stuff where, I'm dropping weight, catching it.
Yeah, you've strapped, the one I saw, you strapped plates to, it looks like some sort of a band, and they're just hanging there, and you're like pulling on it and hitting it like every time as you do what almost looks like a single arm chest fly.
Well, so
see if you can find a video of him doing some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Which
it should be the one right there, basically top left, underneath the top left one. Yeah, right there. So that's So it's basically like all it is what a reverse hyper is, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a pendulum that we make. We make it, and it's like a pendulum.
Oh, do you make that pendulum?
Yeah.
We
sick. Actually make it out of El Paso. We just started like last year.
Oh, badass, man! I gotta get you to send me one.
Yeah, for sure.
I gotta review it. That's cool. Very cool. Okay, so yes, please.
Yeah, so it's basically that is just a pendulum that is solid, and all I'm trying to do there is I want to take and be able to apply quick impact and be able to progress the impact on specific joints. And specifically why I like this, because I still do work in a lot of baseball, right? Baseball players, when they have arm stuff, when they have arm injuries, arm pain, a lot of it is like there's no way to train a thrower for high intensity impulse like that. Or at least I haven't seen anything that actually does that. A lot of it is like if you're just doing traditional weightlifting, like you're just moving weight slowly, or you're moving weight relatively slowly as it's compared to the sport, right? So this allows us to take elbow, shoulder, and even for lower body, like knees, hips, and we can apply specific impact to those joints at high volumes so that we can actually prepare them for their sport. Because what I want to be able to do is they literally, like, let's say we take a pitcher, they literally get into their game where they're throwing, and it feels easier than the 1 to 3 sets of 100 that they just did on the hyper arm at for 6 different moves for the elbow and shoulder.
Right.
Like, I want the game to actually feel physically easier than that on their arm. So that is the goal, is to be able to prepare their body for what they're going to ask it to do within their life. And that is the reason that I utilize that quite a bit.
It's certainly a safer environment to engage in those types of movement patterns in a gym, in a controlled training environment, instead of in a game setting where you've got adrenaline pumping and you don't really have... I mean, you may get injured and not even know it, and then after it all wears off, you're like, oh man, something really hurts, like I need to do rehab.
Yeah.
Has this... Two questions. The first being, has this been well received by the athletic community, and how has this been received by the non-athletic community? Because I can only imagine what the gym bro community thinks about this.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. But that's the thing, like, it looks... Well, I guess 2 parts to that. Number one is when I first start somebody, I'm not necessarily going to have them jump straight into stuff like that. Like a lot of the stuff that you see on my Instagram, like the 6-foot depth drop on one leg.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have
You did that off of Mark Bell's table. Did
Yeah,
that one.
yeah.
I saw that, yeah.
That one was only like 3 feet or something, so that was easy.
So you've dropped off twice that high.
Yes,
Landed on
six is the highest that I've gotten.
Okay.
It was wild, man. Like,
Yeah.
the way your legs feel after that, you feel like you can stomp through a freaking like truck.
Yeah, I can imagine. And
Yeah.
so how long have you... Okay, so please continue. Yeah, so
but
trained to do that stuff.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. So I'm not going to start somebody with what you see on my Instagram. So we might do this at the same movement, right? Like movement is, in that instance, movement is single leg depth drop. That's just one of the moves that we'll do in training. Where you might start is, hey, you're going to do it off 4 inches. But depending on what level you're at, like if it's a college athlete, professional athlete, like, okay, we might be able to go a foot, 2 feet, whatever to start.
Yeah.
But we want to build you up over time. And the same thing with the hyper arm, with the impact type stuff is we can start you with that. But what we want to do is we want to use the feedback that your body is giving as a measure of how much to push that and how intense to go on it. Because your body will give you or will tell you what it's ready for. For me, pain, tightness, any of that type of sensation, all that is simply information that your body is feeding up to your brain that is telling you like, hey, we're doing a little bit more than you're ready to do right now.
Right.
So we want to do the same movements that I'm going to have a lot of people do. It's just we regress them to whatever level you're able to do them at. And then when we do that, we can take like the whole exercise selection that I have and we can put people on those exercises just is extremely regressed if they need to be extremely regressed. And I just think it's a little bit tough to communicate that on an Instagram page.
Oh.
You know, so that's why like people see it and they're like, oh, bro, you're going to get injured. And I'm like, yeah, man, if I just woke up today and tried to do this and hadn't been training for the past 15 years, yes, I would get injured. Okay, but understand that's not the case. I'm not going to post me doing a 4-inch depth drop because that's just not, I don't do that. So like, I'm not going to post that, you know, but that is what I'll have people start with if that's where we need to start.
Yeah. That's an important distinction to make, I think, as any coach on Instagram, any coach anywhere, but especially if you are using social media as your launch pad for all of your business. Everybody tends to post a lot of the really flashy, really impressive, really cool stuff. And I think it's just important to always make the disclaimer to the audience and say, look, you just need to know, because I don't know, maybe you get the same thing. I get people who will contact and say, hey, listen, I'd love to train with you. I don't think I can. I don't think I'm at a place where I could come in there and I wouldn't be able to do this or that, and they hem and they haw. And it's always important to have a conversation with them and say, like, hey, listen, you got to know, I assume you came from Instagram. A lot of that's going to be marketing. And I mean, I am showing my most impressive athletes doing my coolest things, but I'm doing that so that I can have this conversation right now. And you need to know that you're not going to come in here and do half the stuff that you see on there, not for a while. This is a very, very progressive process. It's not something you're just going to jump right into. And it is, because that was going to be one of my biggest questions for you, was the process of progression and regression on what you're doing, because it's so much different than just hitting a selectorized machine. That's easy. I can just drop the pen. What exactly is, I mean, let's say somebody comes into you with an injury. Let's say somebody comes in and they're in their 50s and they've never done your training and they've never even done any training. Like, let's say they haven't even been a gym goer for their whole life. Do you start them with normal, concentric, eccentric, amortization phase style of training, full range of motion, and then after 3 months start doing this type of, ligament proofing that you do so well? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so if I'm working with someone that's like, 50 years old or something like that, we might not do stuff like that for a long time. Or even if just without the hyper arm there, that swing, like if you just take the rope and you impulse into it, like that might look way too intimidating for someone that's never trained before. So if they've literally never trained before, I have something, I call them the joint moves. So all that is like you take every joint that you have, you move it every direction that you can move it, and we do that for a given amount of volume. So let's say we do 25 reps, 50 reps, 100 reps, whatever, at each joint.
Oh, sick.
That's extremely simple. An extremely simple thing that someone can start at if they've never trained before. And that is going to give them some basic awareness and ability to use all the muscles that control all the joints in their body. So that's like one example of like, okay, if I'm working with someone in that case, I have modalities that we're going to use that we can regress and go to, versus just like, oh, this is the one thing that I use for everybody. Here you go. Good luck. Oh, you broke your shin. Too bad.
Yeah. Are these movements more suited for ligament strength or for muscle strength? Or how exactly do you make the distinction between those two?
Yeah, so to me, I want to train all of it, right? And so what makes sense to me is that the speed at which you're doing it is going to play a large impact or play a large role in what it stresses. So something that is very fast impact, even if you think about a sprint, like if you take an impulse like those that were on there with a hyper arm, you take that impulse where it's very quick impact. Your leg hitting the ground in a sprint is very similar, where it's like that impulse against the ground.
Yeah.
So we know what happens during that is all the muscles around the joints basically are going to isometrically contract. That force is going to go into the tendon, and it's going to be a little more tendon based, where the goal is basically to make you springy.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a similar way that I think about the impulse work is that's what's happening is the muscles around the joint are going to isometrically contract. That force goes into the joint and allows that to become more springy.
Yeah.
Right. Now, that being said, I don't want to do only those because I also want to train that more muscular end of that like muscle tendon junction, right? So that's where all the other work that I'll do comes in, which is, joint moves or just normal traditional moves. Like I'll still do those as well. Like one of the things I'll do, this isn't normal traditional necessarily, but like the slow lowers. So I'll basically do one move for 3 minutes with your goal being able to lower in a move for 3 minutes, like a deep push-up, right? Or a push-up. If you start at the top, you want to slowly lower yourself for 3 minutes and pull yourself into as deep of a position as you can.
So it's almost a isometric. I mean, if you're going...
Well, the goal is actually, if you want to get technical about it, the goal is actually for it to not be an isometric.
You're moving for 3 minutes.
You're moving very,
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 very
very slowly.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to press back up as if you didn't just lower for 3 minutes at the end of that.
Okay.
So that, for me, is a very foundational thing that I use to understand the level of capacity that someone has and their ability to be able to recover as they work and repeat work and recover as they do that. So it's kind of like a little bit of a baseline of how much volume can that person take.
Gotcha.
Right? Because if you can utilize your body in a way that allows you to literally lower for 3 minutes and press back up at the end as if you didn't just lower for 3 minutes, right? That is a good indication for me that you know how to tap into yourself to be able to continue to go.
That's no small feat to be able to do a push up for 3 minutes, go down slowly and then push back up.
Yeah.
I have maybe one client that can do that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. No, exactly. And so that's something that's a little bit different than the impulse work, right? Where it's not super exciting to look at. I mean, I put that up. I put that type of stuff up.
Yeah.
But that is something that's very, very, very simple where, again, like if we were working with a different client, like someone that was older, we could start with a regress version of that. Like, hey, lower for 15 seconds, then 30, and work up to that.
Especially in the beginning. We have a family member who is trying to get back into shape. And I think this happens a lot of times where people will go to the gym and not really have a plan of attack on what it is they're going to do. And almost always, if that's the case, they end up trying to do something that maybe someone told them to do, or maybe something they think they should do. Maybe they go run or sprint. In this particular case, with somebody who just decided to go sprint, and that results in an injury. And then they feel as though they've not only not progressed, they've regressed past their starting point. They're now at an even deeper starting line with nowhere to go. What exactly do you think is the best protocol in the beginning? Because in your facility, I don't see a lot of machines. Do you do free weights? Like what do you implement other than, this body weight protocol you're talking about? What do you implement for clients who are overweight, clients who are extremely start line type cases? How do you do that?
Yeah, if you want me to be completely honest, I don't get a lot of those. Like,
got it.
Like just by the nature of what I release, it's going to be people that are a little bit like they want to really push the envelope, and so the people that I have closest to that would be like, I still train my dad, I still train my brother, I still train, and then there's a couple other that I've gotten as of late where a little bit more in that scenario.
Yeah.
So with those people, I'm still going to do the similar stuff that like literally what you see here. I'm going to do similar stuff. It's just at a much lower level of capacity. Like it's just going to be regressed a lot. And I don't use protocols necessarily. Like I'm not, even when I do rehab, like I do a lot of rehabs because I'm in baseball, I do like Tom John rehabs, labrum rehabs. A lot of the initial clients that I get are those type of clients. Well, obviously when you're a day or two out of like freaking Tommy John surgery, you're not going to be able to move your elbow. No. Right. And so what I'm doing with them is like, okay, we're going to train the rest of your body at an extremely high level, and then we're going to move your elbow however much you can move. So like let's say first day you can go 2 inches. We're going to do that like 700 times. where we're just.
You do any flossing?
I don't do flossing. No.
Well, how come?
I have a little bit of a different or interesting take on kind of some of that stuff. So specifically, like,
I'd be curious to hear it.
yeah, I mean, the way that I look at it is like, if something doesn't feel right, if something feels tight, right?
Okay.
That is a very proper response from your body.
Okay.
Okay. And so I want to be able to hear that response.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, to give an example, if I'm working with someone after TJ, after surgery,
Mm-hmm.
I want them to actually be fully off medication before we start moving directly to the joint that they just got operated on, because what that medication is doing is going to shut off feedback from their body.
Sure.
I want that feedback from their body. And so the reason to get back to the question is, like, some of the more passive stuff, I think from my perspective, it does help you feel better. And sometimes it will allow more range to show, right? But the reason that it does that is, like, if you take the sensors that we have within our tissues, right? And, like, let's say we're going to do massage, and if I put pressure on those sensors, like literally just put physical pressure on that sensor, it's going to change the feedback that your brain gets. Okay. And because it's changing the feedback, the response that your brain has is different, where it allows a little bit more of that range to show, and it doesn't feel as tight, right? But we haven't.
It doesn't feel as tight.
It doesn't feel as tight.
As in the case of a flossing band. Someone can move, in the case of, like, if somebody has a ACL and they partial tore it, and their PT recovery calls for, let's say they just did PRP, and so now they're going to do flossing twice a week.
Yeah.
Would you go through, I mean, your knee does literally, that's a perfect example, because it does one thing, it does flexion and extension, and that's it. If I don't floss it, maybe they can move it a little bit, but they're not getting I mean, flossing does, you've got your circulatory effect where your blood is going into it. It's creating resistance, but only slight resistance. I mean, you're talking about a band that is paper thin, and it's just enough to where they can do it and get a little bit of a pump, if you will, around that area.
Sure.
Then take it off, and perhaps it feels slightly better. I mean, so you just skip the flossing and just have them move because the flossing interferes with the sensors going from the injured area?
Yes. That is the basic reason that I don't use a lot of the passive type of stuff. It's just because, like, I don't want them necessarily to have to feel like they have to rely on that. And I'm not, if people use it and it works well, that's fine. I'm just, like, from my lens and my perspective, it's not something that I've found that I need to use. Sure. And again, I don't want the athlete to be dependent on that. Like, I want them to actually feel, if something is tight, I want you to feel that being tight. Like, sometimes if guys are like, I'm sore after something, or this doesn't feel great, I'm like, that's fine. Like, let it not feel perfect. Okay. It's absolutely fine.
What do you do for recovery? What's your protocol for recovery? Hey, this feels bad. I feel sore.
I'm like, that's fine, man.
Right, but
I honestly,
I feel hurt. I feel sore. I got a game tomorrow. What can we do to mediate that?
Yeah. So in that case, there would probably be, like, we would move it. Yeah, we'd move, like, the joint moves where, like, let's say we do, instead of 100, 200, 300, etc. joint moves, like, that is probably something that we would utilize. But again, at the same time, I also don't want to get into a thing with the clients that I have or the athletes that I have where your body doesn't feel perfect. You have to do something to try to get it to feel perfect. Because feeling like you have to feel perfect to go out and perform all the time, to me, is more of a block than something just feeling a little bit off. Like, it's different if it feels significant enough where, like, hey, I can't go play. If that's the case, then sure, maybe there's something that we need to do, but I'm probably only going to do that if it's like it's like your championship game and we absolutely have to go perform, then, like, do whatever we have to do. Right? But if it's not that, and something feels off, like, I don't want to just slap a Band-Aid on that for a period of time. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, I mean, sauna, ice bath, peptide recovery, any of that type of stuff. I mean, do you ever go down that road with athletes who are in your training, if they're coming to you for training, and they, obviously, I'm sure, implement some form of recovery as your athletes are with you?
Okay, so here's my just straight up take on recovery, right? So, well, like, I guess, how do you view recovery? Like, what does recovery mean to you? Just so I have your perspective on it.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of times people mistake overtraining with under recovery. I think proper training requires proper recovery. If you are training 6 days a week, you need to be recovering at least, I'd say, half of that. So that's typically my equation when I run that with clients. I'm like, if you're here with me 3 times a week, you need to be taking at least 1 day, probably 2. That's an uneven number, so it's a bad example. If you're training with me 4 days a week, 2 of those days you need to be implementing some form of recovery. You need to do hot yoga. You need to get with, a sports therapist and get a massage. You need to go into the ice bath. You need to do sauna. You need to be doing something to implement a recovery process to mirror the training that you're doing.
Sure.
That's typically just from a 30,000 foot view. That's the equation that I run with most of my athletes.
Yeah, no, that helps. So for me personally, the way that I look, if I break down recovery, extremely simple. Like, all recovery means, or in order for something to have to be recovered, you have to use it. If you don't use something, it doesn't have to be recovered, right?
Sure.
And so to me, that starts with, if we want something to be recovered, we need to actually use that thing at 100% of the capacity that it has, right? If we don't use it 100%, there's no reason for 100% of it to be recovered because you haven't used it. So to me, recovery starts with actually knowing how to tap into everything that you have. And then the recovery is a response that your body has to some action that you do. So to me, even the modalities that you might say are recovery, right? The actual recovery aspect of it is still a response that your body has, because you're actively going and doing the sauna, or you're going and doing the ice bath, or whatever it is, and your body has a response to those things. Okay? And that response is what we call the recovery. But the sauna isn't the recovery. The sauna is the stimulus.
Sure. It's the tool to get your body to do a certain thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then when I think about recovery, if I want someone to recover at 100%, the most important thing for me is to figure out, can you use your body at 100%? And so we can make that a little more real or practical, right? If we go back to that slow, lower, deep push-up example where you're trying to pull into position for 3 minutes, then press back up, right? So if we isolate just the elbow joint when we're doing that deep push-up, the elbow joint as you're lowering is going into flexion. That's physically what's happening. The muscle that pulls your elbow into flexion is your bicep, right?
Sure.
So what we want to be able to do as you lower in that deep push-up is to be able to actually use your bicep. So your bicep physically shortens to pull you down into that position. And as that's happening, your tricep is going to physically lengthen. A lengthened muscle indicates that it's recovered, right? So if I can pull myself down into position, my bicep is fully short, my tricep is fully lengthened.
Sure.
That means that that's recovered, and that's what's going to actually allow me to press back up at the end. If, as I'm going down, I'm trying to use the tricep to resist myself, that is going to fatigue out, and that's when you can't execute that rep.
Okay.
Because you're not, your elbow is physically going in flexion, and your tricep is trying to resist against that, and so it fatigues and fails out. So I want my athletes to be moving in the direction, to be choosing to move in the direction that they're moving.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So we can take that. Does that that's at the elbow?
It makes sense. But I still, if I were to do that enough, I would get sore. The next day I would most likely have some sort of soreness in some way.
Yeah. Well, so, and I can walk through an example or an experiment that I did in that to be okay, how full of shit am I? Is this real? Right?
Are you saying you don't get sore, your athletes don't get sore? Is that you?
No, but
am I understanding that, or how?
No, so that's the basic thing that I go by for recovery is if we go back to that, being able to use, if we go back to just the bicep, being able to actually use that fully. So what does that mean? We can fully shorten it and we can fully lengthen it. Right. We want to be able to tap into all aspects of that. And that is the stimulus, which then necessitates the recovery to be full from that. Okay. And also so that's how it physiologically or physically shows up. But in order to be able to do that, I'm going to have to be able to tap into a level of emotional, mental, psychological, just levels of myself to be able to actually physically do that. Right? Because I'm not going to be able to access physically what I'm not willing to go to mentally or emotionally.
Okay.
So it's taking everything that I have, even if you want to think about different secretions that we can have, hormones, whatever. I want to be able to access all of that as I'm going through these exercises to be able to stimulate the release so that I have to recover those. Okay?
Okay.
So it's a full system thought process, right? And so to get back to your example of never being sore, it doesn't mean that I'm never sore, but it's the ability to repeat what it is that I want to repeat. So the experiment that I did was the start of 2023, I did an experiment where I was doing the rebound. Have you seen the rebound rep bench? Basically, start.
Point it out to us.
It'll be go back up. It'll be in one of those. I think it's in that. Yeah, the first video or the top video.
The one with the overhead press right there.
Yeah, it'll be the second exercise here.
Okay.
No, maybe third exercise. It's in here somewhere.
There's the puppy.
Yeah, that's my here, this one. So basically you start at the top, you drop, you
Drop and
catch,
catch, yep.
and then you press back up. So anyways, that was the experiment that I did. Was basically like I took and I was like, okay, if this is real, if these slow lowers are going to be able to recover me, what I should be able to do is I should be able to do that at a maximum intensity every single day and use this deep push-up to recover me. Right? Like I should be able to do that. So that was the experiment that I went through, and over the course of 3 months, the rebound rep bench, it started at 205, then it got to 275 after 3 months. And I was able to do it
You did one rep like that.
I was
every
working
single
up. Yeah, I was working up to a max. At the start, I would do twice a day, and then as I got into it, it'd be once a day. But so it would be like work up to a max, use what I think is supposed to recover me, and let's see what happens.
And what exactly is it that you use to recover yourself?
The
From benching every day. That was 275 on there. Is that what that was? That
right there was 335, but that was just like a couple days ago.
Oh, there is a third play. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
But what I'm saying, like at the start, in 2023, it went from 205 to 275 in the 3 months. But I understand, like I wanted to use it to see if this whole recovery idea that I had could actually accelerate the speed of the progress of an actual physical exercise, like the rebound rep bench. Okay. So that was a test that I used to see, like, okay, can I recover myself as I work here through these slow lowers? So the process was basically like, okay, I'm going to do the rebound rep bench, and then I'm going to do a series of slow lowers afterwards to recover me to be ready to go again tomorrow. And that was the experiment that I ran. And I've never made that much progress.
And how long was the entire... You, I assume, documented this in some way. How long was the whole experiment? 3 months?
3 months.
Wow.
3 months.
And every day it progressed. You just the fact that you benched every day is amazing and didn't get hurt. So you progressed your bench over in what kind of intervals?
Well, it was just like I basically went up to a fail every day. Like I just went up to whatever.
So one rep that?
One rep every day.
One rep every day.
Yes.
What would you do to warm up before you just dropped? I assume you didn't just drop 335 on your
No, I mean I'd start with the bar, then 135, then whatever. Like I would just warm up in the exercise.
Okay.
And then I would do the slow lower stuff afterwards. But the reason that I want to go into that is like that's what I mean by the recovery is by asking myself to use everything that I have, that stimulates the recovery of everything that I have. So like the training stimulus to me is the recovery. But to go along with that is like, if I now take and I understand what it means to be fully invested in what I'm doing let's say in a slow lower deep push up, if I know how to be that way, I now want to be that way all the time. Like when I'm having this conversation with you, when I'm driving in my car, when I'm on a flight, when I have a conversation, when I'm writing programming, I want to be that way all the time, because the second piece to that is your body is always learning based on how you are right now, right? So if in the training session I'm fully in what I'm doing, I'm fully invested in what I'm doing, but then when I get out and I go to, let's say I'm in college and I go to class and I don't want to be there, and I'm like, 50% here, 50% somewhere else, like thinking about game, thinking about training, thinking about a girl, whatever. Your body learns how to be inefficient in that, how to not utilize everything that it has in that moment. And so then when you get back into training, it's like, okay, now I got to get myself going again. And I got to like kind of like wake up type thing, right? So what I found is like, if I can understand how to be in that slow or deep push-up and then just be that way all the time, that actually allows my body to become more efficient. And now if you think about adaptation cycles, right? Like how we actually progress. Let's say person A uses 50% of what they have, person B uses 100% of what they have. This person is actually going to progress much more quickly. Literally. They're going to be able to go through adaptation cycles faster and get more out of each cycle. And so that is what I'm looking at, is like, how efficient can we get those adaptation cycles through just understanding how to tap into everything that you have and use that to recover yourself.
I'm hearing a lot of emphasis on the mental side of things with your training, and it's amazing you've been able to perform this on yourself and get to where you've gotten. How exactly do you teach this to someone? I mean, this is... There's a whole group of people that would say you're full of shit.
Oh, for sure.
There is a whole group of people, like coaches that I know, that would say this guy is nuts. That everything he's doing is totally contrary to everything that the last 50 years have taught us. Myself included, if I'm being frank.
Yes.
How exactly do you teach this to, the novice, but also how do you teach this to the professionals? How do you convey these methods to people who are doing other forms of training? A lot of times I am very open-minded with the way that I coach and the way that I listen to, I mean, even guys like, Seedmen, like there are people that are sticking to very dogmatic cycles of training. And this certainly fits that description, that I always want to hear out because I don't believe there's any one correct way to do something. I believe that every single different tenet of exercise physiology has a place that can help someone. And not everybody is going to be able to do this. There is an entire demographic of human beings that will not take to this. No matter who you are, no matter how you... And correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you feel differently. Do you feel you could teach this type of stuff to any human being walking around on Earth?
Well, so I guess what I would say is this is my version of it, right? That doesn't mean that it has to be everyone's version of it. If someone is a great artist, like in terms of like drawing,
sure,
it's the same thing. They're tapping into things that other people haven't figured out how to tap into in terms of how they create art. Like in terms of what they see when they look at a landscape, or in terms of like that type of thing, right?
Sure.
That is basically their version of this, right? So I think anyone that is at a high
right, level, but I would say there are unlike a piece of art, I don't believe art can ever be wrong. I believe if so, well. I suppose I should say that's not correct too. Somebody could do something. You could do something terrible and call it art, and it would be wrong.
Yeah.
But I believe what we're talking about here, as far as exercise implementation, you're dealing with clients, you're dealing with people's health, you're dealing with people's lives, their injuries, everything that comes with it. There's a lot more at stake, at least in my opinion, than a piece of art. And it's not as though you're only performing this on you; you're performing this on others, and you're exposing this. You're showing, and which again, I see a lot of implementation for the stuff you're doing. But there's also a whole group of people that would say, he's missing a giant piece of the pie. He's teaching one small sliver, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But how exactly do you come to terms? Do you implement other coaching philosophies with this? Do you, the earlier question again, how do you teach this? Can this be taught to everybody? Can this be taught to everyone walking around on Earth, or is it only, because you deal with high-level athletics, is it only for high-level athletics, or can you implement this for anyone? No,
so I think it can be implemented for everyone, but again, the display that they have of it is going to be different. And so the way to get to your question, like the way that I do that is, one through, like if you actually read the descriptions of the posts that I put up, as well as like when someone starts training with me, I have 13 and a half hours of video content that they have that they can go through. So that is walking through like, okay, what is the basic premise behind like how your physiology works in terms of like understanding just simple stimulus and response. You have a stimulus that comes in, you have a response that your body has to that stimulus. That's all we're doing with training, right? That's it. So like there's 13 and a half hours of video content that goes through all of those different principles and all those different things. And then I'm also having an hour-long conversation with them to say, okay, where are you at? Not only what is currently presenting for you in terms of like what is, do you have injuries, et cetera, like all that different type of stuff, but then also what is your current understanding of what it is that we're going to be doing? Like how well do you understand your own body? Because that is a huge part of it, is just getting a person to understand their own body and to understand their own system, so that they don't have to distrust that system. Because like what I'll say is, I put it up on my Instagram a couple of months ago, but like I had a lower back injury. And when that happened, I didn't have, dude, it took me like 9 minutes from the time that it happened for me to be able to stand up and then walk over and turn off the camera because I was filming that set.
How'd you do it?
Seated Good Morning. It wasn't anything, it was like 135. It wasn't anything crazy.
It happens.
But I had a lot of other stuff going on, and so I was trying to like rush through the workout on that day. So like I know what caused that to happen. But even when that happened, like there was a moment where I was like, oh, what did I just do? But it very quickly it was like, okay, I don't have distrust in my body because I know how it works. Like I don't know, like I just know how that works. Like I know how stimulus response works. I know how I can go ahead and rehab this, etc. So I want to be able to get that person to a point where they understand their body and they don't have distrust in that. And the way that I do that is through the education side of things, where like it's a discussion, it's content that I have available, it's all those different things where it's not going to happen in a day, it's not going to happen in a month, it's going to happen over long periods of time because it's taken me a long period of time, right? And so it's just a slow transition into understanding what your body is, how it operates, and what it has the capability and the potential to do.
I certainly agree that mental side of things, especially in the beginnings of training, both when a client is new and also the beginning time frame of training when you're in here for the first 15 minutes. If you're, sometimes I always check in first and foremost with my clients, ask them how they're feeling, ask them how they're doing. I mean, sometimes it's 6 a.m. in the morning. So my client's like, how do you think I'm doing? It's 6 a.m. Like, I'm fine. And I progress my clients very slowly, both in their training over a long adaptation cycle, months and years, but also in terms of the actual session itself. I mean, if someone comes in here, sometimes we'll just have them lay in the red light. Sometimes we'll be like, all right, just let's foam roll, lay on the ground, start with the red light. We're going to start from the ground and go up. A lot of times the mental side of things, it's very evident. That's the biggest problem they have coming in. I mean, people don't have any idea of the type of stuff we're talking about right now because they don't dive this deep into what happens to the body and its interaction with the mind when they come in for training. To most people, those are totally disconnected things. They're thinking, okay, I've got the stress of my life. It's outside of the gym. I'll go to the gym. I'll work out as hard as I can. Then I'll leave and then I'll deal with the rest of the stressors later. But the truth is, a lot of times, as I'm sure you've seen in your own coaching, if you come in with a lot of pre-existing stressors, if you've got high cortisol levels, if you're feeling like, hey, life is just too heavy right now, that's going to show up. And a lot of times, you're right, it creates distraction. And I do believe distraction creates injury.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's being able to be aware of yourself, to know when that's happening, and then be able to like have a way or have a tool to kind of tap back into yourself to get you back to that place that you want to be at. Mm-hmm. And I think training can be used to do that. I know, like, in that example that I mentioned before, like it wasn't that case, but I think there is a case where training can be used to do that, where it's like, okay, this is what you have going on. We simply need to figure out how to like work through that. And sometimes like the slow lowers, if you're asking yourself to go through 3 minutes of that, mm-hmm. all that's going to come up because you're like, there is this, it's going to require all of your attention to do that. Mm-hmm. And what is going to cause you to fail if you fail is mm-hmm. the thing that is your weakest link right now, which could be something that, a conversation that you had that you're stressed out about. If your mind continues to go to that, you're not able to tap into it. Like, that is going to be the reason that you fail. Mm-hmm. So it's like those are a way through which you can work through all those different things, and not just the slow lowers, mm-hmm. but other things as well. Those are ways that you can work through all those things that are popping up mm-hmm. to then figure out, okay, like, how do I want to handle that, and what does it feel like for me to now get back in present time and not have that pulling me off?
Yeah, sports psychology is a class during my master's that I certainly slept through. I didn't see the application for it. I thought, hey man, I'm signing up to be a strength and conditioning coach. I'm not signing up to be a therapist. As time's gone on and as my career progressed, I realized just how incorrect that thought process was. How does that play into your training? I mean, how often do you find yourself actually being a emotional backboard for the clients that come in and work with you, even more so than the physical coach that you are?
Yeah, I mean, it's as much. Like, I would put them all at the same level. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily that I don't want to tell them how to think or how to feel or whatever. I just want to be there to ask a question so they can ask themselves a question to find their own answer. Right? Versus me trying to say, like, okay, this is the way that I think, this is the way that you have to think. Like, I just want to be able to ask the question. Right, and then they can figure out what their own answer is, mm-hmm. and then as they start to do that, they start to understand themselves more, and then they can start to tap into themselves more. Because, like, I have to understand, I didn't go through the process that I went through and still going through all the time. Mm-hmm. I don't go through that necessarily following somebody else or like them telling me what to think. Mm-hmm. That's never really worked for me. Is like someone else telling me how to
telling
think.
You what to do or how to think or how to fix problems. Yeah, no.
Exactly. So like when I'm working with somebody else, I need to remember and understand that and be like, okay, I'm not here to tell you how to think or what to do. I'm here to, again, just provide the question.
Oh, yeah.
To help you work through whatever it is.
Yeah. We've had clinical psychologists have come in here, and I mean, they say the same thing. It's never about giving someone direct advice on problems they have. It's more so about listening to the problems they have and allowing them to come to their own conclusions about how they should deal with it. And 2/3 of the time when people are dealing with problems, a lot of times it can be solved if you are just in the presence of somebody who's there to listen to you talk about it. A lot of problems are inside of our mind, and a lot of shame and trauma and a lot of stuff. For guys like us, we don't have, I'm sure, at least I can speak for myself, I don't have a lot of shame and trauma wrapped up around the gym or around physical training. To me, it's always been a source of enjoyment, a source of fun, pleasure, all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's important to remember that isn't the case for, I would say, way more than half the population of Earth. They don't see training as fun. They see it as, maybe some of them see it as an obligation, so they do it, or they got a letter from a doctor saying they have to do it or they'll die. But most of them do not see it as something enjoyable. They see it as something that has to be done. How do you bridge the gap for your clients who are fitting that description? Perhaps ones that, I know you get high-level athletes, but if you get ones, I know a lot of high-level athletes that don't enjoy exercise. In fact, I would honestly just amend what I just said. I would say a lot of high-level athletes hate exercise. They do it because it's quite literally their job. How do you bridge that gap and create enjoyment with training itself?
Yeah, I mean, so I just want to ask them what they want. Like, what is it that you want? Right? And so if it's a high-level athlete and what they want is to be able to perform at a high level, I'm like, okay, what does it take for you to be able to perform at a high level? And so again, I'm not trying to tell them why they should exercise. I'm just like, what is it that you actually want to do? Right? And so all I can talk about is like for myself, because I've asked myself these questions, right? I know that, I mean, when I do physical training, like it's so much more than just what it might look like there. It's like, this is a way that I tap into to figure out what is the potential that I personally have. How much can I learn about my system? How much can I learn about my body? What can I pull out of myself? Like all of that is what I take in training. And then all of that is what I want to take into everything else that I do within my life as well. So when I'm working with a client and maybe someone that doesn't want to do something, I'm like, that's fine. Just like, go back to what is it that you want? And all this other reactive stuff that comes up where it's like, well, right now I'm tired. Right now I have this relationship thing. Right now I have this. It's like, I completely understand, completely get that. How do you want to handle that? If you were fully present right now with this issue, how would you want to handle that? And then just let them take it wherever they take it. Like, if it's like, hey, I'm not going to train today, I need to go handle this thing, and then I'll be ready to go after that, I'm like, great, go do that. You know?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the times when people don't like, or if you actually think about it, for someone to not want to take care of the body, that is basically a non-survival act.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Like they actually have misinformation around what it is.
Yeah.
Like they're at a state where they don't want to be here.
Yeah.
To some level. Yeah.
And 100% agree. It's an act against the body. It's an act against, I think it's an act against God. It's not something that should be normal for a human being to where you disregard hey man, you're in you get one meat vehicle for this entire life. If you're here lucky, you get 100 years. Sure. But I think, again, if you were to ask them straight up, most people would not say, I'm doing this because I hate my body. Some would, for certain. Some people have, I think a lot of it plays into our culture, specifically gym culture. I think that is doing a lot of people a lot of disservice. It's a big reason why I created the space the way I did. I wanted to make it fun. I wanted to make it enjoyable. I disdained public gyms, public gym life, the people there, the paint on the walls, everything. I disliked everything about the modern public gym arena.
Sure. I've been to a commercial gym in a long time.
Yeah, same here. I think it's important for guys like us to every once in a while step into an LA Fitness and remember that 99.9% of everybody who goes to the gym, that's where they go. They end up in a place like that. They go to EOS, they go to LA, that's the environment they're stepping into, and it's, like I feel it. It's on my chest too. Like I get in there and I'm like, oh man, what? I gotta wait in line to get in the rack. There's all these people around. Half of them are taking selfies. The other half look like they're about to break their back. Like everything is, to guys like us, everything's being done wrong. And I'm sure if you were to step into an LA Fitness right now, especially because the way you implement is even more unique than the way I implement, you would look around and say, okay, well, I mean, literally no one here is doing it right.
But I mean, I guess I'd have to stop you on that because I don't necessarily think like that. I'm not thinking that somebody's doing something. I'm not really that worried if someone is doing something wrong or right. That isn't, like, I'm not going to try to look at somebody and say, you're doing this wrong. Like literally what I want to do. This is my thing. Is like, I want to take and I want to create the thing that it is that I want to create. And me spending time dismissing what someone else does, like looking at it saying that's bad, that's wrong, whatever, that takes away from my ability to create because it's taking energy away from that. So the way that I look at this, if we want to like call this a game or whatever, I want to simply build my game. That's it. And people that it resonates with, awesome. Those people are going to come with it, are going to come into it.
Sure.
People that it doesn't resonate with, that's fine too. That just might mean I need to get better at communicating my message, or be able to communicate that in a way that it does actually reach more people, or whatever the case is. But like, different things work for different people at different times. There's a time, for me 6 years ago to try to do what I'm doing now, it would not have worked for me. Right. So if I look back at what I was doing 6 years ago, I might understand that somebody else is in that place that I was at 6 years ago. They're there now. So I'm not going to go and hate on what they're doing, because I went through that as well. And I don't think it was wrong that I went through that.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where it's like, I want to be able to help the people that are in the correct place for me to help them right now. That's pretty much it. And then just focus on like what it is that I'm building. But I'm not trying to look at a bunch of other people and be like, that's wrong, or that's terrible, or that's stupid.
You're not gonna.
I'm just like, okay, let's have a conversation with where they're at. That's fine.
Yeah, and it's definitely opens up a discussion about the way coaches present themselves on their social media too.
Yeah,
there's a whole demographic of coach, and it's not something I've ever seen you do. It's not something we do. You've seen them. The coaches, they're watching the screen, they're on, and then they critique it. That's their whole thing. They watch someone's training and they tear it down.
Yep.
It definitely presents, whether or not they're right or wrong. You receive the energy that you put out, and when you put out criticism, when you put out negativity or even constructive criticism, if that's your hallmark presentation of yourself to your community, that's the way you're perceived. And I find it's very hard at least for me, to relate to somebody like that, whose entire message, their modus operandi, is for them to go and find somebody and tell them what they're doing wrong.
It's like, bro, you don't have anything yourself, and that's why you're trying to tear down what someone else has. And it's interesting because I understand the person that would be on the receiving end of that video, not the one making the video, but the one that's getting torn down in the video. Like, again, it's interesting to me because like I can understand how someone sees my Instagram and they do that to me without having. Does
that happen a lot? Do you get people that?
I mean,
we get it all the time.
A little bit more lately, just because I think it's
well, you're growing.
Yeah, exactly.
Bigger, more and more people.
But it's like, I guess so. I understand why it would not be beneficial for me to go and tear somebody else down, because the person that's doing that to me doesn't actually. They've never done anything with me. They've never gotten any of the content that I have. They haven't actually talked with me. Like, they don't know what it actually looks like for me to sit down with a person and work with them. And so for me to try to tear down someone that has this massive following that is just easy to look at and poke fun at. Like, the one that comes to mind is Knees Over Toes guy. Everyone.
Sure.
Not everyone, but like a lot of people that are smaller will look at his stuff and be like, this is what's wrong. This is what's bad. The only reason you're doing that is because you haven't been able to build that, or there's something about that you want to do that you haven't figured out how to do. Like, if you look at Ben, the guy that created that, I mean, he's helped so many people. Once it gets to a certain level, there has to be like different strings or strays that come off of that, where it doesn't work perfectly with some people, just because you have such a massive outreach and such a massive audience, right? It's just when you get something that big, that's going to happen. So I'm not gonna try to fault him for that.
No,
right? It's just like,
no. I guess there's also certainly a discussion to be had about who is doing the criticism. Let's just call it constructive criticism, because there can be constructive criticism.
Sure.
Who's giving it to you? I mean, is it just some guy on a troll on Instagram? Then no. Who don't give him a second thought. It doesn't matter what he thinks.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of, I mean, again, I can use Seedman, you can use Ben. There are a lot of high-level coaches that get critiqued by other high-level coaches. And they're not being critiqued because maybe they did something gimmicky. They're being critiqued because their methods may, in fact, lead to injury, or may lead to, and this is, again, I'm the person that comes to mind the most for this is probably, BioLane does this all the time. I mean, he's critiqued everybody I just mentioned in that sentence. And in my case, I mean, I've never really had any issue with anybody at the high level of coaching. But in the case of, you used Ben, so I'll pick him. He's said and done some things that I disagree with. That being said, I don't discount everything he does. I think he has a very good platform. And like you said, he has helped a lot of people. I still maintain that when coaches stick to a very dogmatic philosophy that they have created. I don't create my brand around my training methodology, because my training methodology encompasses dozens of other coaching philosophies. I have a very big scope of work when it comes to how I coach. I brand myself in other ways. The Marvel thing is how we get gimmicky. Coaches like Ben, like Joel, who that's not the case for them. They know they have wrapped their brand ideology around their training ideology. For Ben, he's like, no, I don't do cold exposure. I don't do, he doesn't do certain things that have been, proven, like a heavy carry. He doesn't do heavy carries. He doesn't like them. He said that openly. I think it lends itself to the fact that you are trying to sell your protocol, your programs, your way, and you are willing to ignore or dismiss other variables or other training methodologies that may help your clients more or faster or in a better way that aren't yours, but you dismiss them because just that, they aren't yours. That's, I think, a very constructive criticism of the people that we just talked about. I mean, that I like to hear from everybody, and I like to take the things I like and perhaps dismiss the things I don't, but I don't get dogmatic with my training methodology, if all that makes sense.
No, it does. And I'll just go back to, like, I understand. I think there are a lot of different ways that can work.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I agree.
But at some point you have to choose what it is that you're going to use and what you're going to do. Because even when let's say you're going to use sauna, we'll just pick sauna, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say you're going to use sauna. You're still choosing to use that. Mm-hmm. Someone else is just choosing not to use that. Like, there could be something that you've never heard about before, and you're choosing not to use that simply because you're not aware of it. Does that mean that, like, you're not open to that or whatever? Or does that mean that your stuff can't work? Not necessarily. Like, all that matters for me is, like, does the perspective and lens that you have actually work? Mm-hmm. Even if it doesn't include a lot of different stuff. And it's interesting because, like, you mentioned peptides a little bit before. Mm-hmm. So something that I've used, like, I've messed with, like, BPC. I only took for like 2 months.
BP 157.
Yep, BPC 157. Yep.
Wolverine complex.
Bioregulators, like I've messed with some of those, mm-hmm. right? And I'll use them sometimes with clients, but really, to be honest, the way that I do it is if they ask about it, then we'll probably use it. If they don't ask about it, then I usually don't bring them up.
Yeah.
And we get the same results no matter what. It's just like, if it's in their awareness that, hey, like, this is something that I should probably do, and be like, yeah, this can be beneficial. It's like a top 2 to 3% thing, and then usually they'll end up doing it. But,
have you seen faster recovery from the use of the peptides?
I've seen like the same. You talking about myself personally, or?
Sure. Or with your clients, with yourself?
Yeah, so.
Just use BP 157. Did you use it for something you were dealing with?
I not really. I tried it because I was like, okay, I want to have tried this if I'm going to be recommending this to other people.
Gotcha.
And so that and the bioregulars I took for a longer period of time, probably 6 months consistently.
Sure.
I haven't taken any in like 2 or 3 months, and I don't notice any difference. And I guess the point that the reason that
neither did I. I had a LCL tear probably 2.5 years ago. The tricky part with that, I'm not the best case study for this type of thing either. Yeah. Because I do so many other forms of recovery to speed up. I did platelet-rich plasma. I did TENS unit. I did work on it. I was flossing. I was rehab. So it's very difficult to say whether or not the peptides work. There's a lot of variables. Yeah.
Yep. But so, like, the point being is, if something is in your awareness mm-hmm. as something that you can use within your lens, then sure, great, use it. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that because something isn't within your lens that your way can't work to mm-hmm. get the final result. So that's more of what I'm saying is, like, at some point you have to choose what it is that you do. Mm-hmm. And I think with the couple of names that we mentioned earlier, with when they get torn down, and even for myself, like, I know that I have my own lens and perspective. Mm-hmm. If that lens and perspective works to get the result, to me, that's okay if we don't use other modalities, because I'm not trying to throw in a bunch of modalities just to say that we do them.
Sure.
I just want to get the actual result that we're looking to get.
Yeah. And ultimately, I mean, you mentioned you've got a high-level athletic community that follows you and trains with you. You don't have to work with everyone. I mean, for some people, they may look at what you're doing and say, that's not for me, and that's okay. It's the same for us. You don't have to please everybody. You're never going to work with anybody. You're going to work with, like, maybe 100 people your entire career. So it really, honestly, you do not have to adhere to what everybody else thinks or what everybody else, it's good that you can defend your points because I mean it is unique, and in a setting like this where you're going to go back and forth with somebody else in the industry, it's good that you've done your research and you have everything in line. But as far as appealing to the masses, that's an overrated. I think that's an overrated subject. Frankly, I don't think it's necessary. If it works, like you said, if it works for you and it works for your clients and you're getting results, well, then you really shouldn't have to justify yourself to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that it works should be
Totally.
That's it. Like that.
Yeah.
That's why. Yeah, that's why it's continued to grow. Like I have the store highlights, the one-on-ones. Like I have 15 of them. Where it's just like, okay, this is what's actually happening. Like you say what you want, that's fine, but this is what's actually happening. Like these are what we're getting. So I think that's ultimately what the most important thing that it comes down to is that.
Yeah, that your people you're working with are happy, they're healthy. That's ultimately what your job is as a professional. That's why we're in this. I mean,
sure.
Because if those two things aren't happening, it doesn't matter what you're saying or how great your social media. There's a lot of coaches with that whole equation reversed.
Yeah,
you got a crazy presence on the internet, but your clients are miserable. They hate you. I mean, Wes Watson is a perfect example of that. There's never a good situation where the people that work with you like disdain what you're doing, and yet you're so famous because you've marketed yourself in a gimmicky or in a Instagram noteworthy way. To me, that's why I never wanted to get up until really this last year. I never really got into online coaching. I didn't even really want to be an influencer when this all started. My background, like I said, was with the NFL. I wanted to do coaching. I wanted to be a trainer. I didn't want to be an Instagram coach. I didn't like what I was seeing.
I want to have an actual business. I don't want to have I don't want to just be a name or a face or something. I want to have an actual business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And without, I mean, if we're being honest, without, it's definitely got its perks. Social media definitely has a positive side to it. I mean, this conversation wouldn't have happened without Instagram, but it comes with a lot of added bullshit that you just otherwise probably wouldn't have to wade through if it didn't exist. So it is an interesting song and dance as a business owner. And I mean, you're doing it yourself. So we're doing the same thing. You've got to handle you got to wear all the different hats. You got to coach, you got to market, you got to, I assume, you do all your own periodization and everything. You're doing a lot of different stuff. And one of those, unfortunately, typically is social media.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but I don't know. I try not to look at it that way. Like, unfortunately, like I do actually, there's things that what I put out is going to be something that I want to put out, not just like I feel like I have to put that out. Like literally, like when I'm sitting down and I'm creating content, like pretty much all I'll do is I'll sit there and be like, okay, what do I want to say, and just keep on repeating that over and over and over again. So like when I put stuff out, because I know for me to do it long term, like this is something that I want to. There's a lot of things that I want to build out of what I'm doing, and so I know for me to do that long term, I have to be good with how I'm doing it with myself.
Yeah.
If I'm just trying to create content to grow or whatever, like yes, I absolutely do want to grow, but it needs to be in a way that is like, this is coming from me, and this is what I actually want to say. This is what I actually want to do.
Sure. Big picture stuff. What are you? What's next? What is your big vision? What do you want to see? You mentioned things you want to see grow. What does that look like?
I mean, right now I'm pretty much at the max capacity that I can do for like actual just like coaching
in person. We're talking in person.
I don't
coaching.
do any in person. It's all online.
Oh, it's all online. Oh,
yes.
Okay. Wow. Okay, that's an important disclaimer. So you don't work with anybody in your facility. It's all online. You do everything mobily.
Yeah. So in 2019, I was in a in-person facility for 6 months, and we had like we had clients then. We had like 90 clients at that time in person, but now it's all online.
Okay.
But just in terms of what I want to go with it, like that's getting pretty close to being tapped out in terms of what I can personally do. So what I want to be able to do is take and actually be able to have other coaches within what I'm doing actually be able to understand and apply the information that I have. So like what I'm working on right now is like that 13 and a half hours of video that I have. I want to be able to break that down into
modules or something like that,
into a way that I can actually have coaches go through and learn that. And I've had one coach go through that, and he's starting to coach a little bit. So I want to build that out, and then eventually, I mean, I don't know how, like, there's a lot of stuff, man. Like education sucks. I think education is absolutely terrible. I think schools are terrible. I think they're probably worse to go to than to not go to. like if someone were to just not go to school, I think they'd probably be in a better position, assuming that they have some way to learn about a skill or something that they want to do, right? But like what do you do when you go to school? You learn like, this is how to cheat on things. This is how to get out of things. Like this is how to whatever. Like that's pretty much what you learn at school for most people. And so I think that whole system is messed up. And so I'd like to eventually have some type of impact or do something with that. Food, like maybe have a farm or something like that where I could provide high quality food. So a lot of different things that I want to be able to grow into outside of just like the training and rehab and performance, while continuing to keep that going, of course.
Yeah. It definitely brings up an important point, which is that your practical application, whether or not you do go to school, is as important or more. You're going to need, I continued my education high level, but the internship I had at the age of 16 is ultimately what got my foot in the door and what gave me the love and the passion to do this. And I can say that I learned more there, certainly, than I learned even in my master's. Like, I learned a lot more from the hands-on stuff I did with Ian than I ever did there. Yeah.
And the education is 100% important. It's just, what are you being educated on?
Yeah, and that's, you could also say that. Where you're going to school, who your professors, because I didn't go to a great exercise science school. I went to Westmont, but they had really good professors. I had an awesome exercise science coach. I had a great anatomy teacher. It can be beneficial.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think, you could also make the blanket statement, how you go to school will impact your results from that school.
100%.
If you go to school to drink and party and cheat and just get by, then you're probably not going to get much out of that. But if you do go to school and you're lucky enough, because this wasn't the case for me when I first went to school, I ended with, exercise science, but in the beginning I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And my first couple years kind of spent a lot of time surfing, and I didn't really have focus. And sometimes that's normal. I think that's more normal probably than not. It's probably the exception where you go to school and you find something you love and find something you want to study and really soak it all up. It takes, most of us, it takes more time.
Yeah. And I also think that might be a little bit of a side effect of the earlier schooling process that goes on, where
high school, junior high.
Yeah, like you're basically told that these are the subjects that you have to do, and you're not given any freedom of choice. And so when you get to college, now you're supposed to choose or know what you want to do, when you've just been told basically that you can't do what you want to do because what you want to do was not sit in school for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
Right. And now you're like, hey man, now it's your choice. Go get them. You're like, well, I just spent 12 years getting apathetic about school because I didn't want to be there.
Yeah. Well, what they're preparing you to do, and when I say they, I mean it's a blanket statement for any degree, for anybody who's in school. We all had to go through school, every single one of us. They're preparing you to be an employee. They're preparing you to sit and do something for 8 hours that you don't want to do. Yeah. And I'm like you. I didn't want to be in school. I had oh my God, I had ADD coming out my ears. I was crazy. They wanted me on Ritalin. They told me, like, hey, this kid, you can't sit still. We don't know we don't know what to do with him. Yeah. We don't know how to teach him. And that was, I know it was hard on my parents. It was definitely hard on me. And I think that school is not really set up for people who ultimately end up doing their own thing and creating their own path. I think we're kind of the exception to that. We're not the good students. I wasn't a good student.
I mean, no, it's funny because I was like, I could be a good student. Right?
Yeah.
But it's what I noticed for myself personally is more like, I don't know. I lost like I lost the ability to still choose what I wanted to do, I guess. Like, because I could sit there, I could be good, I got good grades. It was easy. And so I guess for me, I was more just like bored than anything.
Yeah.
But I could still force myself to sit there and be in control and whatever.
Throughout certainly high school, junior high, into college as well? Was that your experience there?
I mean, college, I pretty much went to play sports, to be honest. And then, exercise science I did because I was interested in. But again, it was pretty, I'd done a lot of self-research up until that point.
Sure.
And so, everything that I was kind of hit with there was fairly regressed. So it wasn't super difficult.
Well, if it's any consolation, it continues into the graduate level degrees as well. Probably. I mean, I did the master's. And I did it 6 years later after I had my undergrad completed. So I was already coaching. I was already in here. I had done this for a few years. And by the time I went back, I had my finger on the button of some of the more advanced researchers, and I'd been on Mark Bell. And so you do realize just how behind schooling is with regards to what actually happens when you're implementing real coaching with real people.
Yeah.
What they're teaching you. It's not useless once you get that little piece of paper, but it's not going to prepare you to be a good coach.
Yeah.
By any stretch of the imagination.
For sure. for sure. And that's why I mentioned like education and schooling before. Because, I mean, yeah, that's the way that it is. That doesn't mean that it's the way that it has to be. Like, I think there can be a better way for that to be done. Yeah. Obviously, that's a long ways off for me. I'm still, trying to grow my little thing here.
Yeah.
But
have you ever taken? I mean, is there maybe a certification that you liked or took that you enjoyed that you thought, hey, that one's actually pretty darn good?
I don't have any certifications. Just to be
good for you.
Straight up, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
but I will say, like,
my answer is no. By the way, I never took a certification that I thought was good.
Yeah, which I don't think there's anything wrong with them. It's just like, learn it and then have it in your toolbox. It's not necessarily like the cert that I'm after. It's more like the information in what's applicable and what's not.
More than certs, I encourage coaches, especially new coaches, to find really good. There are Elite FTS, Matt Winning runs one, Kabuki Strength runs them. There are workshops, like weekend workshops that you'll get a certification from it, but it's a hands-on process where you're actually going to go and work with a coach. You're going to go into a small group setting where they're set up to actually teach you how to implement it. Not buy this course online, sit down for 3 weeks, and then get a certificate. That's a waste of your time. But doing it for the experience and the knowledge rather than just the piece of paper with the right coach, that's probably what I would advise coaches do if they are looking to go down that road.
Yeah. And honestly, just go into what you're interested in at the moment. Because if I look back on my journey, that's pretty much what I did, is like, whatever I'm interested that's right in front of me right now, I'm going to go as deep into that rabbit hole as I can.
Sure.
And then when I run out of that rabbit hole, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another one. I'm going to go as deep as I can into that one. And that's pretty much how you build your own lens and perspective.
Yeah.
Is you go into what it is that you're interested in. And that's a little bit, that's why I said before, like, I don't look at something and say that is absolutely right or absolutely wrong, because there's just different learning process that you have to go through. Like, you have to, for me, I have to push something to an extreme to figure out what level I can take that. And then, okay, now I can back out. And when I back out, I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to use this for the people that I work with. Because I'm not going to take them to that same extreme because I found out what was too far.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, it's a cool process.
We are definitely our own guinea pigs when it comes to that sort of thing as a coach. I mean, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I with my training, my periodization, if I see something I'm interested in, or maybe a new movement or a new piece of equipment, I'll try it. Usually we'll demo it in some way. And then if I find that it has merit, if it's got value, then I'll choose selectively, but give it to the clients that I think it'll benefit the most. But yeah, that it is a interesting similarity that a lot of coaches, I think, follow. The best coaches are pretty good at sort of testing and running trial and error on themselves before they give it to the clients.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, you have to, because it's interesting too, because like, if you think about the perspective that you have, like, you can only have your own perspective. And so if you haven't taken someone through something, and then you're trying, or if you haven't taken yourself through something, then you're trying to give somebody else that thing, you're going off of this perspective that someone else has that you've never experienced. You know, when the client comes back to you with some type of feedback on that, you're going to be like you're not actually going to know.
Right.
Like, when you go through it, when you put yourself through it, you know. And it's so interesting because, like, when I think about programming, I basically want to ask enough questions of the client or of the individual that I can put myself in their body, feel what it is that they're feeling, and then just program for them what I program for myself based on where they're at and what they're feeling. Like, I think that is the best way to program, because, like, if you know what to do for yourself and you can put yourself in their shoes, in their scenarios, like, literally what are they feeling right now? And if I was feeling that, what would I do? That allows you to then not just go off a protocol. Like, you're not going off a protocol that you saw, that you got from some course that you got from somebody.
The textbook says.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're going off of, like, this is what actually works, and I know that this is going to work.
Well said. That's beautifully stated. Same way. I do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
If it's because I've done on a rare occasion, I've given someone an exercise. One time in particular comes to mind where I thought of an exercise right on the spot where I'm like, oh, that would work really well for that. And then I threw the client on and they were like, oh no, that sucks. That hurts. And I was like, really? Hold on. Let me try. And then I was like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
And
it's way better in your mind.
Way better in my mind. But it should never stop there. You should always have one or two executions personally, have reps before you put your people on it. So that's, excellent piece of advice. If people wanted to learn about your modalities, if they want to work with you, if they want to see more of what it is you're doing, bro, where would you send them?
Just go to my Instagram. That's where most of the stuff is now. It's DAC Performance and Health. DAC
Performance and Health. Instagram, and it's a DAC as the profile picture. Perfect. Awesome, bro.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah,
that
thanks
was
for having
awesome.
me.
That
Yeah.
was so much fun.
That was fun.
Jake, you good, bud?
Good to go.
Awesome. We'll stop it right there.
Cool.
Thank you guys so much for watching that episode of Becoming the 1% podcast. If you like the content and you want to see more of it, hit the like and subscribe. Activate that notification bell as well. We really appreciate it. If you guys want to see more of it, we actually have the Becoming the 1% Instagram, and the podcast is available on Spotify. For our socials, we have Strict Vision Athletics on Instagram, we have it on YouTube, and we have it on TikTok.